How close are you to the border?
Driving distance, probably about a good 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Because I am more towards like Colorado.
You guys probably see a lot of stuff because even that's fairly close. And I was just listening to a podcast the other day about a border patrol officer, and he was talking about like all the random desert stretches that people go through so that they can actually like get without border patrol catching them.
Especially in New Mexico, it's such a long distance and a long desert from like
Yep.
civilization to American civilization. Like it's very dangerous.
Yeah, that stuff's I don't know. I couldn't imagine crossing the desert. I mean, whenever you're in that situation, if you have your village is getting destroyed by cartels or whoever and your family's in danger, you got to do what you got to do. But still, making a journey like that has to be terrifying. And you don't know, like he was talking about, you don't know if the coyotes are going to end up like screwing you over in the end because usually they end
Right.
up selling you without you even knowing it.
Oh,
It's crazy, crazy stuff.
Oh, I'm sure it's different times now than it was years ago.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how, like growing up, was it in the area that you lived?
In Albuquerque, I mean, it's a very like dangerous city. It's home for me. Like I love my city. It's a very beautiful city. Like we have the Sandia Mountains, and we have like the Rio Grande River running through the city, and it's very. They call it the city of enchantment, but also entrapment because you come here and you never want to leave, and it is kind of like quote unquote like the Breaking Bad type of thing. Like it is, you know, they did a very good depiction of Albuquerque and the way that it is out here. And like last year, there was like 121 homicides. It's just crazy. It's like Wild Wild West. They're
With that many homicides, it must be really hard, like ripping and running the streets in today's day and age, because you don't know. Like you're at even a more risk right now than you would have been. I'm glad that you got out of the game.
it's scary, the fentanyl epidemic, and you know the the shards, and I know that even hard is making a comeback. Like,
Yep.
and I guess they were, I don't know, they were like APS, Albuquerque Public Schools were like testing the waters of like APS students, like of high schools, and like they all tested positive for, even our kids and our younger generation is like experimenting. Like, we don't even have a water park out here anymore.
So
Mm.
the school system tests the kids to see like what drug. I've heard of that before. Honestly, I don't know if I would feel comfortable having my kids in a program like that, to be honest with you.
Exactly. No, they're just doing it out of like they're not asking anybody. It's just
Yeah.
they're just
Kyle, what do you think about that? Like, could you
doesn't that
imagine if
seem
you're
illegal a little bit?
I mean, it depends what they're trying to do because if they're like, "Hey, we're gonna take your kid's blood and all types of stuff," you can't do that. Now, from that, so are they actually testing the kids or are they testing the kids?
The sewer lines of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, just to find out what other chemicals and what drugs and all
Yeah,
that
what
are in
what
there.
they're testing positive for. Some of them, like some schools, were even testing positive for like coke.
Yep.
right?
They all tested positive for coke, but or that was not true.
I
Majority of them tested positive for that, but some of them were tested positive for H, fentanyl, like these crazy drugs. And I'm like, how? When I was in high school, I was just doing like benzos, or I
Yep.
don't, I was doing nonsense.
It's different now though, because that's why you see so many people, so many young kids that are unaliving because of fent. Because it's legit everywhere. Because that's the thing. You said you would maybe use benzos or whatever. They think they're using a benzo, but they
Exactly.
aren't.
even Adderall. They think that they're
Yeah.
popping that Adderall to do better on the test, and that's it. It's a one and done.
I wondered about this just because I knew you were at least decently close to the border. I obviously things are coming up from there because I mean there's all these conspiracy theories and all this stuff. So for the
Tunnels,
people,
the drones.
yeah.
There's been like pipelines of like they'll like liquefy like shards, and send it like water form. It's just they
Mhm.
got the most craziest, most ridiculous and that's a huge problem in this state.
I
Whenever,
remember I used to live down by the border in El Paso, Texas. So
mhm.
they had the Bridge of America right there. I lived there for 2 years.
Oh,
I always wanted to cross that border. Trust me. I always wanted to do it. But I was so scared because they would behead people. Like the cartels down there were just beheading people.
oh my gosh.
Right. But you could see the people. I would go down to the city and I would watch people walk back and forth from Mexico to the United States.
What do you end up seeing coming from the border? I mean, are you seeing a lot of people that are illegal immigrants and stuff like that?
Well, see, because we already have like the people who speak a lot of Spanish here, who are
Yep.
Spanish speaking people, and we're like Hispanic over here. So it's not uncommon to see like a whole bunch of people speaking Spanish. But as far as like just the influx of resources, like I swear they're not in Albuquerque at least. I feel like they're not being. They don't want to come here. They want like a different cities. They want like a
Mm.
bigger dream. Like
Do you notice that like the hotels are flooded? Like where do they place the people? Like women and children and like what happens?
because I've heard of like sanctioned cities, so
Yes.
I know like they're kind of being shipped off to those cities, and like,
Well, and what happens with all that? So whenever people come through, because they aren't flooding hotels and stuff, because it depends how you come over too. So if you did everything the way that you're supposed to, whenever you come in on that visa or green card, whatever, you pick the place that you're going to go. Like you have to have a sponsor, you have to already have a set residence. Most people who do it that way, it takes a few years. So they will end up having like a spot farther in the country because they don't want to be right next to the border. And so sometimes whenever they have uh there's a whole process because whenever there's illegals that come over and they get caught, if they continuously get caught, they get shipped off to some degree. They get shipped back to Mexico, but then you can also like plea for asylum and all types of stuff. And then those people, if you get all of the paperwork done after you crossed illegally, then you can get switched off to a host city and claim, I wasn't safe in Mexico, so I need to go somewhere else.
mm,
So, but that's why people don't normally come over the right way because most people are trying to claim they're in danger now, and it takes years.
wow.
Yeah. So whenever you were growing up and everything and you were seeing all this stuff, I mean, you mentioned that you were doing benzos and stuff in high school. What was it like back whenever you were in high school? What were you seeing?
My high school years were actually a lot more stable than my childhood years. Whenever I was a child, like my parents, both of them struggled with addiction really bad, and so that trauma that caused.
Trauma is a lot to work through and you go through these phases where you could be okay and then something triggers you and you go backwards. It's like a constant battle. But you know what? I'm glad that you were able to try to see your own self-worth. That's the thing. A lot of people don't realize like it's all about self-love and when you don't have that as a child, you have to learn all on your own.
So did you not end up graduating from high school?
My junior year in high school, I started working at Ojos Locos, which kind of led me down the worst hill I could ever go down. I remember my dad came to my to my uncle Mikey's house, and he was like, "Sarah, I found out what Ojos Locos is. Please don't work there." Like he begged me not to work there, and I was like, "I'm gonna work there, Dad." But then that kind of party lifestyle brought more drugs into my life, and then I ended up experimenting with H at
Mhm.
18, which is very interesting because I always told myself I was never gonna be my parents.
Did you ever use with them? Like, were they like, hey, like you're doing it?
My childhood was a little traumatic. Um, my parents would kind of fight sometimes. My mom would get violent with my dad. Uh, I experienced like death at a young age, and it just the trauma of watching the drugs destroy them. So they met through smoking hard together. They were like crackheads together. And then later on, they would get divorced when I was 8 years old, and they would go their separate ways. My mom would end up going to heroin, and my dad would end up going to meth. And uh, but then something happened to my dad. He kind of had to face a choice, freedom or straight slavery, and you're gonna go to prison for a long time. Kind of the same thing, like you go to jail and you're like faced with, are you gonna? Your life, or are you gonna go back here? So
Sure.
he picked freedom. And then it just having just one parent that was sober changed my whole life. Like I went from like being held back in first grade, like, never knowing any answers to questions, to like the first year my dad was sober. I actually got an award for having all attendance that year. And so my teenage years were actually a lot more stable just because my dad was clean.
So you finally felt like you had somebody that you could depend on. Some sort of stability is what helped you to feel like you could thrive.
But yeah, my teenage years were definitely a lot better. My mom ended up going to prison when I was 15, 16. She went to Grants Correctional Facility in Grants, New Mexico. She was there for like a year and a half. She got out when I was like 16, 17. And
Mm.
I thought when my mom got out of prison, it was going to be like every other time she had got out of prison, or every other time she had got out of jail, which was like, she would call us on holidays when she would be in jail, and she'd be like, I'm sorry, like this will never happen again. And then she'd get out and it happened again. But when she got out of prison, she was different. My mom had changed, and she found interest in her old hobbies again. She started planting things. She got her medical card. She was like really thriving. But then I turned 18 and I started experimenting. And I told myself I'm never going to do that.
Did you feel like you needed to self medicate yourself? Did you ever have any mental health issues growing up, like diagnosed like anxiety or things that you felt you needed to medicate for?
I thought I had ADHD. Well, I think I have ADHD.
Right.
And I recently heard that females will get wrongly diagnosed with bipolarism and depression, and they'll be getting pills for those problems, and they're not even scratching the real problem.
Which makes sense because there's a Dr. Amen on here that's a psychiatrist. I saw one of his videos and it really resonated with me. He was saying, you have that mother that comes walking in with like an 8-year-old child, and the child's there for an ADHD diagnosis. But then he realizes, oh my God, the mother was never diagnosed. Like, hello. And then the mother has that aha moment, like, wow, okay, maybe I do have ADHD.
When did you get diagnosed with those, with depression and bipolar?
I didn't get diagnosed with bipolarism. My mom got diagnosed, but I never really got like diagnosed with any of those things. But I do want to get diagnosed for some ADHD, like the dopamine that's not in your brain is a real thing.
Whenever you were growing up too, since your parents, at least in the early years, since your parents were both struggling, were you, I guess I don't want to say neglected, but did you not have a lot of stuff growing up? Did you ever want for food and stuff like that sometimes?
There was a huge need for money and a huge lack. Like there was a huge lack, especially whenever your parents are spending like the money for your school supplies on.
Yeah, their addiction unfortunately had to come above and beyond any of your needs, and that's sad. And that causes a lot of trauma. And you've been through the ringer. Is that why you started self-medicating with benzos? Did you want to like numb yourself? Like how did that happen?
I didn't even know if I wanted to numb myself. I started smoking weed in middle school, And then, like, when I was in high school, I started, maybe drinking, and then it just progressed.
I mean, that's how it goes for a lot of people because that was kind of my thing. Now, I went through all that, had my experimentations, and had a lot of fun with things. And then I got introduced to opiates when some really bad stuff was going on. And I was so used to just using whatever that it was just another thing that I was using to have a good time and
Right.
get away.
You know, one time I was at my friend, we'll just call her Allie.
Sure.
I was just experimenting, partying, and she was like, my sister from Santa Fe is in town. Her and her girlfriend are in the closet, smoking some black. Would you mind if I go and hit it? And I was like, no, boo. Like my mom, she struggled with that stuff, but like I love you. You could do whatever you want. And she was like, okay, do you wanna? And I was like, I'm good. She's like, are you sure? And I'm like, I'm sure. And she's like, are you sure it's like a 30? And I had been experimenting with perk 30s. They make you all itchy. That's cool.
Right.
And that one thing, made me a little willing.
I remember those days of like starting to take pills and I would eat them and chew them up. Then I went to snort and it's like you progress. It's like a progression because you're not getting what you got from it the first time. So if somebody has a better idea to make that more intense, you're going to take their idea, right?
What kind of rabbit hole did that lead down? Did you end up right after that? You were just like, I'm gonna take off with this because I need it.
I was like, I took off with the H, and I also was like, let me see why my parents, destroyed their life over hard and why my dad picked, the mess. So I wanted to try everything because I felt like I got a new perspective every time I tried something. I was like, okay, this is actually, I understand a lot more, you know. Uh, but yeah, it sent me down a real, like, I quit my job
How
shortly.
many benzos were you taking? Because I really struggle with benzos big time. Like opiates was my primary addiction at first, but benzos kind of took over for me.
It was hard to find people with prescriptions. Like after, I got on that black bandwagon, I was like, I don't have time for anything else. She's like,
Now, was
Sarah,
your sister using or was she trying to get you on the right track?
exactly. She wasn't a user. She was trying to get me on the right track. And she was just like, God has so much more for you. He doesn't want that for you. And, you know, there's so much more to your story and your life than that.
Was her tough love helping you? Because I see somebody in the comments saying, do you use tough love for the addict or do you try to help them? My opinion is love, love and connection.
Exactly. No, that's exactly what got me out of my addiction was my sister's love and connection. Like, she had faith in me to for me to get out of my addiction.
Is she your older sister or younger sister?
She's my older sister. I have one older sister. Her name's Ariel. She was born in '90, so she was born in '90. Her name's Ariel, and then I have a little brother. His name is Aiden, and he's like 15. He was born in '08. So there's like a huge gap difference right there.
Yep.
He actually got adopted from my mom, and Billy, her boyfriend, had Aiden, and they were struggling, So my little brother got adopted, and at the time I was like, I thought it was a curse. I was like, God, why did you do this? This is like, how could you do this? And later on, I see exactly why it had to happen. And it's like
Right.
a beautiful story. And Aiden is so much more blessed where he's at, but he has both of his parents and like his biological parents, both of them are gone now. Losing your kids, like your addiction. Like I even had, that's something my addiction took away from me was my firstborn. You know, I was in such a really messed up place, and you have to be selfless sometimes. You can't like you have to be sacrificial in your love. I know some moms are like, I would never give up my kid. Like that would never be me. And I like you have to kind of appreciate the moms that can say, I need you to be safe. I need you to be loved. I need you to be taken care of. And I ain't doing that for you.
I feel the same way. Like, if you really can't provide, you need to do what's right and make sure that that child's needs are met. And if you can't do that, you need to figure out who can help in that situation.
I still get to see her. She's still a blessing in my life. Like my stepbrother and his wife adopted her. And that was a huge blessing, So and now God, like, the years that the locusts have stole, like, I will return to you, and like things that have gone away, like now I have another child who I get to be her mom.
I know what it feels like to lose. So when you had that pregnancy, were you detached knowing that you were going to lose that child, or were you attached to that pregnancy? Because I've had different experiences like that, and a lot of women don't talk about that.
So like with the second pregnancy, I I was like, I'm not gonna have this baby. I cannot. Like, I already lost one, and I don't even like the baby's dad. Like, I was just like, this ain't gonna happen. So I was running from it the whole time. But God still blessed me with her, and like she changed my whole life in the ways that like everything came together this time around. It was like everything lined up for keeping her. I was still struggling. Like, I was really scared. And then I ended up going to jail. So like this was the first time that like whenever I got picked up by BCSO, they didn't just take me straight to Metropolitan Detention Center, or they didn't take me downtown. I mean, they just took me straight to jail. Uh, and then like I was hoping that nobody was gonna come pick me up to take me to a different county for those charges, but they ended up coming, picking me up. uh and when you're in jail, you're like the whole time you're like, you feel like a very scared animal. Like, you're detoxing, you're like kind of like, really wanting drugs. You're kind of going crazy. You're like, am I gonna be clean when I get out? Like, how is this gonna work? But every time you see somebody new come in, you're like, hey, do you have anything? You're like, you're so stressed out of your head, you know
Right.
but time it was dry. It was super dry, and I believe that was like a miracle. And then, I got picked up by a different county. I got taken to Bernalillo, and I finished the rest of my time there. And it was like the COVID policy they had at that other jail was a lot different. Their COVID policy was like, we'll leave you in a cell all by yourself for 3 whole days, and you only get like 10 minutes out.
That's horrible. I can't
Wow.
even imagine being in jail during COVID, because you're right. You're already so freaking isolated. To isolate somebody more, what is that going to do for their mental health? Really?
Yeah. The felony charges were like me doing really stupid stuff in casinos, in the bathroom at casinos. At my favorite casino. Like, I don't know if you guys have like that type of thing where you guys live, but like out here in New Mexico, like that's what we kind of do for fun, maybe, is casinos. Like, people will, get all twacked out.
Is that
You know,
addicting as well? Like, when you're partying and you're doing whatever, like, do you want to keep put money in the slots to try to, hey, I'm going to make up so I could really get myself good tonight? So
yeah,
it's like a vicious cycle, right?
exactly. Exactly.
How many of your old friends that you were using with and stuff that do come around still use? Are a lot of them now sober too, or have you're the only one?
I am the only one. My friends will come over. They like respect me. They respect that. Like, they're proud of me.
I'm sure they look up to you, because I'm sure that they really want what you have, that they want that inner peace and not having to wake up with regrets the next day.
I hope that it changes something in them, that like if I could do it, they could do it. And I will always be there for them, even if they are on drugs.
Has your faith gotten stronger? Because throughout this talk, I've heard you talk a lot about, like, God's always had my back. It worked out the way that it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Did going to jail make your faith stronger? Did you start reading the Bible? Did you start getting into things?
It did make my faith so much stronger. I always had God in my addiction, though. Like, I would be the friend who would be like, we have a really hoopty type of car that could just like stall out on us at a like a red light, and I would like pray for the car to start, or like, there would be like a cop approaching and I would like pray for him to turn like really out loud in front of my friends. They like knew that about me. Like,
You got to have whatever you can whenever that cop's coming up and you got a bag full of some shit.
and like, I don't know if it's just like out here, but like I've been on like high speed chases and stuff. Like, luckily I've never gotten, and I don't know if it's just like the nature out here. Like, I don't know if that happens like other places or if it's just kind of something that the criminals out here are like very used to doing, like running.
So some of that, I bet you, is because you're so close to the border, because they probably do have a bunch of high speed chases where they cross the border, and whenever the cops come up, they finally catch you or whatever happens. They're like, oh, there's not 10 people in here who aren't supposed to be here. It's just somebody, strung out or whatever. So they're probably so used to that, they just let it go for the most part, at least.
No, they do. Like, and they'll let off too, because they know like it's kind of dangerous. Like, people have gotten ran over and stuff in high speed chases. Like, so the cops
Wow.
kind of know not to really keep it going.
I'm down with the high speed chase. Let's do it. I want to do one. I've never had a crazy one. I've had a couple avoiding
Yeah.
cops, but not a high speed chase. Were you worried at all that, like, getting off of Sublocade, were you worried that once it kind of wore off and you were back to your own devices, do you still worry that you could go back, or are you at a comfortable place now?
I was worried maybe that I was like, you get so afraid of the withdrawals. You're like, I do not need this traumatic energy in my body. So I was afraid, like, what is it gonna feel like? But yeah, it's just the way that it leaves your body is so weird and cool.
Sometimes you got to learn, like, is this my normal body? Like, you don't know what your normal is. I feel like when you get off of mat medication, and I'm sure Kyle, you could attest to this too. It's like you start to be very hyper vigilant about your body, and
Mhm.
like what do you feel like? I'm so in tune with my body. I could tell things like that.
Well, and that's what I keep trying to explain to people sometimes, because everyone always has to ask, how long did it take for you to feel better and for you to get back to normal? And it's like, well, I wasn't withdrawing after a certain point, but then over the course of months, like every couple of weeks, I would notice, oh, this is a little bit better. I didn't know I was missing that. So you can't really quantify that in any way. It's just you slowly get back to a place where everything is, I guess, back to how it was before.
It was just crazy because like whenever I got out of jail and I I kind of stuck with the straight and narrow. I didn't leave my house. Like, I would always just, kind of, you can't, I felt like I couldn't trust myself. I needed to stay home.
Right.
Needed to kind of be told what to do and humble myself and, like, understand that I don't have all the answers, and maybe, like, doing things that people want me to do isn't the worst thing ever.
Did you lean on AA, NA? Did you do anything like that to help you build a sense of community?
I did. Like, the first day that I got out of jail was on a Friday, and the next day I went to a Saturday night NA meeting, and it was like that point on that like I did 90 and 90, and I really embraced the NA family kind of, and just that newness that NA brought into my life, like the new friend aspect, the new people, like the togetherness, like the fact that I had people to look up to. Like, not everybody in
The
NA.
sense of community, the sense of like, I'm not alone in this. I have somebody else that's been through the same experiences.
What was the, I guess, reception you got whenever you went in there and you obviously started talking to people and letting people know what you've been through? What was it like whenever you told people you were on MAT medication?
They were actually super okay with it. Like,
Wow. Okay.
in Albuquerque, there's lots of people on methadone, there's lots of people on Suboxone, and in the rooms, like, people know that, and they were just happy to see that, like, I was in the rooms and I had, they weren't upset that I was on Suboxone, and whenever I would speak about it or even, like, be like, I got on Sublocade, like, they were happy.
Like, what made you think about Sublocade? Did your doctor offer it to you? Did you do your own research? How did you find out that that was like a goal of yours?
My sub doctor, she was a nurse practitioner. She was like super cool. It was always cool going to go get my subs. It always kind of felt like a therapy session, like they would
Yep.
go
Right.
to and they just want to know things and they're really cool and sweet. And, over a 9-month period of me being stable on subs, she was like, because I kept like telling her, like, I still hate to be addicted to stuff. And then, like, sometimes I would get like nauseous. Would you guys ever get nauseous on subs? Like just randomly, like feel really like sick, or like maybe you didn't drink enough water.
I do know the feeling that you're talking about. I
Yeah.
do. I feel like with the difference with Suboxone and Sublocade is the Suboxone has like peaks and valleys where like the medication peaks and then it kind of slowly goes down. And then that's why people need to maybe take another dose to feel okay. But with Sublocade, you're just on a consistent
Exactly.
stream.
There's so many different benefits to Sublocade. So I felt like my nurse practitioner, she saw it in me. She was like, there's this thing called Sublocade, and it's a monthly injection. And I got kind of freaked out with the shot aspect of it. I'm like, what are you trying to put in my body? I was real.
Yeah, because it feels weird because when you get Sublocade injected, for those people that might not know, it
Yeah.
puts like a little gel deposit, like a little pocket into your abdomen,
Mhm.
counterclockwise. And it does, it feels awkward because when you touch it, it feels like a lump.
Yeah, it feels super weird. I was like, I was like, okay, I think I want to do it. But then whenever I came in the next session, they're like, okay, we have your shot. I'm like, I didn't do any research. The first thing I looked up was on YouTube, and I found, I think his name was Dave. Nicole has done like a kind of thing with YouTube and him. Anyways, he's on YouTube. He's the guy that like you see him getting the shot in his stomach.
He actually filmed it.
Did you feel more confidence as you got off the Suboxone?
Yes,
I did as well.
so much. I felt like I was like more stable, like my emotions were more stable. I wasn't so like angry or like, moody. Um, because, there is a lot of highs and lows, and whenever you wake up in the
Hmm.
morning, you're sick, like you're like, I need to
Right.
take a sub before I do anything. Like, you're just kind of
How did it feel in that moment when you woke up the next day and you didn't have to take nothing?
yeah, it was so weird. Like I got up and I sat at the table where I usually took my sub, and I'm like, I think I don't need anything. I think I'm good. It was awesome. Like I loved the fact that the freedom it brought me was beautiful.
Do you feel like that helped you adjust to? Because that's one of the things with subs when you're taking, like, if you have to take 24 milligrams a day and it's 3 times a day, you're still constantly using something. So it doesn't have to be, but a lot of people kind of contribute that to addictive behaviors. So did it help the fact that you got that shot, you didn't have to worry about anything,
Yeah.
and it was all good?
It made me feel like Superwoman. Like the fact that like I literally started feeling like I had, trust in myself, and I
Hmm.
had like
Confidence.
to not take anything. Like over time, after months and months of like you literally not taking anything for day after day, month after month, like you are not taking anything. You literally think you're not doing, like you're doing it all by yourself.
Yep.
And then one day you're like, I think I can do it by myself.
What are your plans with your social media and like moving forward in the future? Like, do you want to like go back to school? Like, what are your plans?
I want to go back to school. I got like kind of pumped up to go to CNM. It's a community college out here in Albuquerque. Uh, for the summer semester. So I am trying to go back to school. I'm also kind of trying to start my own business. It's just a cleaning business, nothing crazy, and I also like, do some marketing for some grows and stuff. But so yeah, like my social media, I want to grow it. Like who doesn't? We watch these
Right.
people on TikTok on our FYP, and we're like, they are so cool and they have so much to say and they say it so good, and sometimes I think we forget like it took a lot of practice. Like it didn't just happen overnight. There's so much I feel like responsibility sometimes when it comes to our platforms and we don't want to disappoint people, and we want to make people proud.
Do you think that that holds you accountable as well? Because I know myself, I'm not going to lie. My people keep me accountable. Like if I don't show up, I'll get a, like, hey, what's up? Where you been? With like, you know what I mean? Like that's another thing for you to keep in the back of your head, like to keep you on the straight and narrow because you want to help people, you want to give back.
Well, awesome. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing everything you kind of gone through.
Yeah, have a good day, guys. Bye
You
bye.
too. Thank you.